Hello everyone, welcome to this new video that I'm making. Today I'll be making a Honkai Star Rail character tier list on the 1.0 version. Depending on whatever time I'm watching this video, and as of time I'm recording the video right now, the 1.1 live stream for English just occurred like a few hours ago. And since it's been more than a month that we've been through this 1.0 version, I feel like now it's the right time to finally kind of give our opinions and criticisms on characters while being past the honeymoon phase and no and we're not going to be hyping up characters or criticizing characters just personal biases or whatever. I'm personally a trailblazer level 52, and I buy the I buy the monthly supply pass and the nameless honor. So I feel like you guys watching this video and the opinions that I'll be giving on these characters, I feel like it's going to be very relatable to most of the people who play this game. uh, Before we start the video, I'd like to make a couple of disclaimers. Firstly, I'm not going to be rating characters who are unreleased yet. So for example, characters like Kafka and Blade are not in this list. And even though we kind of know the idea of these characters in terms of their kits and whatever, but we don't know if they're going to nerf or buff these characters up until release time. And therefore, like, if we don't know their final versions, we might make a wrong opinion on these characters. Like for example, Jingy 1 from the closed beta tests got a 6% less crit rate from the traces to his final version. And for example, his lightning damage got converted into attack percent. So little things like these you might not think as very important, but this heavily determines how important the character is in the end, like in terms of their strength and quality. Another thing as well, of course, I might put your favorite character in a lower tier, and this doesn't mean that your character is trash. I mean, this game is very similar to Genshin, as long as you put the right gear and artifacts or relics on the character and build the right team around them, they could be viable. But I'm just talking about character strength, like base-wise, innately. I don't really want to talk about potential of characters, because every character, like I said, if built properly and have the right team around them, could uh, be SS tier. So yeah. Uh, Also another thing, you also might say that my character is very good. I try him out in simulated universe, and that's the thing, right? In my opinion, I'm judging these characters based on endgame content, such as, for example, Memory of Chaos mostly, and events or whatever. Any character can be broken in the simulated universe using the right buffs and path. So, putting disclaimers all over the side, let's start with the video. Arlan. Arlan is very similar to a character like Zhao, if you guys play from Genshin Impact, where he takes away his health so he can deal more damage. And this is another thing why I mentioned for my disclaimer about not judging unreleased characters. In the beta, Arlan's ability of taking away his health and the damage he gains from losing this health was very high and very good, to the point where might consider this guy as S or A tier. But right now, they nerfed him to his final version, and because of that, uh, the amount of health lost and the risk that is associated with that, as the risk of being one-shotted, is too much compared to the damage he gains. So he doesn't gain enough damage based on the HP he lost. So I feel like he is a very risky DPS character, which is why I'm putting him in the C tier. Next up, we have Asta. Asta, in my opinion, could, if there was a tier of A+, I would put her there. But for now, and maybe I'll change it later, I'll put her in S tier. In my opinion, actually no, let me put her in A tier. In my opinion, she's a very good character. She's the first character you get from the gacha. Like, you do one single wish and you're gonna get her guaranteed all the time. She's a very good character. She, in my opinion, is the best toughness break opponent in the game. Right? For example, if there's an enemy with fire weakness, she's gonna shred that within 2 skill attacks. And uh, because of that, on top of that, she offers a attack buff every time she connects with an opponent up to 5 times, and each of those buffs are 4 or 5%, so you might be dealing 20% more attack, which is big as well. And another top of that is our ultimate increases the speeds of your allies. If you know how to time it, in terms of your rotations and whatever, this character would be extremely deadly in terms of the utilization of her ultimate. Because this game is turn-based, so speeding up your teammates with her ultimate is something huge. Next up, we have Bailu. Bailu is immediately an SS tier character. Surprisingly, unlike games like Genshin, where if you know how to dodge everything, you never need shielders or healers. But in this game, it requires more skill, in my opinion, as you are more required to care about your skill points, like how to preserve and generate your skill points. And you're always going to be guaranteed to be hit, so you always need some sort of form of protection or healing. Which, cool thing about this game, because of these mechanics, this makes healers a must-have in the game. So Bailu is, out of the two healers in the game, is the best healer in the game. She heals so well. Her ultimate basically makes you regenerate health after 2 turns after you get damaged, which is really good. And her skill, regardless if it's like RNG based, as in like her skill is like, let's say, droplets of water, and it depends on like where these drops drop, and these are like random, but still the amount of healing it offers is so much. And because of her, you could basically like really sustain your team and keep them alive, and maybe to an extent, if you build her on enough HP, could keep them invisible. Nonetheless, an awesome character, SS tier in my opinion. Next up, we have Bronya, another great character in my opinion, the second best character in the game, the best support character in the game also. Um, what more can you say about Bronya? I value characters so much that basically negate the game's core mechanics, which is turn-based. Using her skill, she basically gives your DPS another turn, or whoever you're trying to buff with it. Uh, and that basically says, like, here's another extra turn. And that completely negates turn-based, and that's crazy. Bronya reminds me of Bennett, but like on steroids, because Bennett gives you an attack buff, but Bronya gives you an attack and a crit damage buff. And on top of that, in case you ever need to run out of skill points and you don't have to use her skill, or you can't use her skill, her basic attack from an early trace will have 100% crit rate. So that means that you never have to worry about having crit rate on her. So you just build all the crit damage on her, and she's going to deal insane basic damage. But that doesn't matter. Like, that's not the main point, and that's the crazy thing. Her main thing is just basically giving your DPS another turn. And because of that, I feel like she can work in any team. If you have her, like, in my opinion, it's like for example, you're pulling on a limited banner and you pull her, that's like equivalent to winning a 50-50, though you technically lost it. And yeah, awesome character, double S tier. Next up, we have Clara. Clara, in my opinion, is a SS tier character. In this game, from how we're playing it, this game kind of like really prefers characters which are single target DPS, and doesn't like characters who are like AoE DPS or damage over time. Maybe that will change over time with new characters or change of the mechanics, but basically the multipliers in AoE damage and damage over time is not as much as a single target DPS. But Clara is basically the exception, you know what I mean, when it comes to this AoE DPS. In many situations, she is a very good DPS dealer, single and AoE damage wise. Another type of character that can also be technically a preservation character with how tanky she is. Her follow-up damage is the best in the game. And like, what more can you ask? Like, Clara, in my opinion, is a better character than Jingyuan. Now, that's a hot opinion, but that's my opinion. Again, a character that basically kind of fits the niche. Where, like I said previously, that AoE DPS characters are not really that favored in this game, but Clara is the only exception, and she out DPS's Jingyuan, automatically puts her as SS. Best AoE damage dealer in the game. For now, of course. Next up, we have Danheng. Danheng, honestly a great character. I really like him so much, but unfortunately, I ran for him for the longest time. Unfortunately, I might have to put him at B. And that's okay, right? A character you get in the beginning of game is not supposed to be like, till the end of time with you, right? Of course. He's gonna serve a purpose for a time, and once the time comes when you're gonna pull a new DPS or build a decent team, he's gonna eventually gonna phase out. But no problem with that. The main issues I have with Danheng is he's quite skill hungry, and for some reason, like, even though I really tried to build him on like decent amount of speed, for example, used his own light cone, then used Yang Qing's like 4-star light cone that gives you 10% speed, I don't feel like he was quite quick for a DPS. And in my opinion, like, a DPS character should always have a lot of turns. And yeah, a character who doesn't deal that much to begin with, and on top of that, quite skill hungry and not that quick, I'm gonna put him in B tier. Next up, we have Gepard. Now, Gepard is my man. I love him so much. But putting all personal bias aside, he works very similarly to a character like Bailu, but has some additional benefits. For example, his skill uh, on E0 has a 65% base chance to uh, freeze an enemy, and freezing an enemy in the game is something huge, very important in this game. Basically negating their turn, and that another thing why I value him a lot. Basically, you're getting rid of one of your opponent's turn because he has to recover from the freeze. And I'm not even talking about, and I'm not, and I'm just gonna start talking about this now. I wasn't even talking about his like main, attraction. Is his shield. His shield is basically the equivalent of healing. With how much he gets attacked often, especially with like the traces you can achieve with him, where it gives the enemies to attack him more often, and then with the light, depending on the light cone you use, that will make him get attacked more often. And since he's already a preservation character, he has the highest taunt in the game. That means that he will always be attacked often, multiple times in a turn, which basically means that he will generate his ultimate very quick. Basically, like I said, in this game, you cannot dodge stuff, so characters like healers or shielders are very valuable in this game, and Jephard is the best shielder in the game. Double S tier. Next up, we have uh, Herta, right? Herta, I almost forgot her name because I don't use it that much. Next up, we have Herta. In my opinion, unfortunately, she's a C tier, even though she like says uru uru a lot. Like she isn't that special of a character. Like I don't want to go too depth into it, right? And freezing and stuff is all cool. Fallout damage is all cool, but just not enough, and that's okay with a character like her who is supposed to be given to you and multiple copies of her for free for just completing the simulated universe. It's kind of given that the character won't be that special. But who knows? Maybe in the future, like I said, since I don't care about. I'm not talking about potential right now, but maybe in the future, potential characters with all these 4-star characters eventually uh, will be judged upon when they're E6, maybe 1 year into the game. We can finally maybe, give some shine on her and someone might showcase her and maybe be so broken. But for now, she's C. She ain't that special. Next up, we have Haimiko. And what hurts my heart is a character that is so prominent in this game, that is so important to the storyline, it quite possibly being, actually, no, she is the worst standard 5-star in the game, in my opinion. Uh, Here's the issue. Again, like I said, this game doesn't really favor AoE DPS damage dealers, and though she has a cool mechanic of basically triggering a follow-up attack every time you weakness break opponents 3 times, that damage is not enough, and her base damage in general from her skill and basic attack is not enough, and ultimate also like it doesn't deal enough damage, and that's the problem we have high Miko. But I could say she's a great uh, auto character when, for example, you're farming in like let's just say traces for or like calyxes where the enemy's weakness is fire. Over there, then she's awesome. But if I'm telling you a 5-star character, right, that is so like hard to get, like in general, because you know how hard 5-star characters are to get, is only good for just killing squishies, then I'm sorry, I'm putting her in A. Next up, we have Hook. Honestly, Hook, like I don't know too much about her, I don't really too much, but from what I heard, she could be a good like single target DPS, and she's a good damage over time with her fire. But again, like from what I've seen, like she ain't that special. I'll put her here, like in the middle, of my opinion, in B tier. Uh, Again, yeah. Next up, we have the main man, Jing Yuan. This hurts my heart, man. Honestly, like another time. Like honestly, you could even make the case that he could be A. But anyways, a character that is so like voiced well, such a good trailer that he had, uh, cool abilities, the ability to summon basically a god, which is the Lightning Lord, and he's only in, and like in S, it's really unfortunate because his multipliers are just not enough. Like I mentioned earlier, like in the video when I was talking about the reason why I'm not like ranking, other characters, um, upcoming characters, is because of like the nerfs that they gave to Jing Yuan. Like for example, they gave him 6% less crit rate in this from the beta to the current version, and They changed his lightning damage all to attack percent, which basically is a massive DPS decrease. And because of that, he's not dealing enough damage. And he's a very investment heavy character, right? Of course, Jing Yuan build him properly is going to be insane. His light cone is legitimately the best light cone in the game in terms of like the passives that it offers. But if you're telling me like, oh, I have to get a guy's light cone so he can be viable, that is a scam, unacceptable. Because I'm not a whale. I'm not gonna be like pulling every character in light cone. I'm mostly just pulling for characters. And if I get a light cone, so be it. I lost a 50-50, right? I'm not gonna be pulling for light cones right now, right? For a while. So yeah, S tier. Unfortunately, heavy investment required for damage that isn't that special to begin with. I'm sorry about that. Really so disappointing. Next up, we have March 7th, right? A preservation character that is also a shielder, but isn't similar to Shepard where she only applies like one shield at a time, depending on the Eidolons, but I'm not be talking about Eidolons right now. So yeah, March 7th. Honestly, she's like top of B and like bottom of A. For now, let me put her in the bottom of A. And again, a character that can provide shield, again, a character that can help sustain and maintain your team and keep them alive, will always have some sort of value, you know, from now till the end of the game, until maybe they change the mechanics completely where you could dodge damage, which I don't think so they'll ever do that. So, a character like March 7th, I will always hold some sort of special value because of her shielding abilities. Main issue with her is, again, she just like could shield one person at a time, and her follow-up attack because of the enemy getting attacked is not that special damage wise. Unfortunately, bottom of 8 here. Next up we have Natasha. You know, Natasha is a very important character. Again, is like I said, with the game how it works, you're not going to be dodging damage. You're not going to be like negating or nullifying damage. So characters that are healers are or shielders are very important in this game, which is why I'm putting Natasha above characters like Haimiki or Asta, which could be a very unpopular opinion. Uh, Again, legitimately the only free healer that you can get in the game, and most of the people who I know run Natasha as their sustainer and healer. Again, similar thing to Bailu, doesn't heal as much as Bailu, but decent amount of healing, dispelling debuffs. You know, what more can you ask for a healer character? You know, just like a worse version of Bailu, and that's nothing to be bad about. Next up, we have Pela, and you know what disappoints me? You know, Pela, in my opinion, has so much potential as a character, and maybe because since we're just only 1 month into the game, you know, people haven't really discovered the true potential. You know, a character that does an AoE defensive shred. In my opinion, I thought before the game started, like I was like, wow, this character is gonna be special. You know, this character is gonna be broken, but I don't know. Like I don't know. Like maybe, like I said, maybe there was enough testing, but you know, she's not that good. Like the main she's like she's squishy, doesn't have too much like self-sustaining abilities, and because of that, like you know, she often like when I try to use her in like Memory of Chaos, and I kind of have like her properly built, she often gets one-shotted because of the least amount of defense. But for now, you know, she'd be in B, but I am really anticipating this character. I feel like you know maybe a couple of versions later, we might see her like in A or possibly bottom of S. Yep. Next up we have Qingque. Qingque, like honestly, it's a very like unique, um, like very unique ability she has, which is basically like you know it's a unique mechanic where basically like you could be lucky and like basically get the optimal damage with her. But the last thing you want in a gacha game where you're not guaranteed characters is a character that basically relies on gacha to deal certain amount of damage. Like legitimately the only places where you're guaranteed something in a gacha game is the damage that you're dealing, right? Because of your artifacts and you know your character's builds and whatever and the team around them. And the last thing you want is a character that can basically use all your skill points possibly just to achieve their optimal damage. And in my opinion, though it's a very unique core mechanic, uh, this game style is too risky because of the game mechanics. Her game style is just too risky and too like luck based for my liking. But if you strike the jackpot and always get lucky with her, she deals a very decent amount of damage, which is why I'm putting it in B. Honestly, if you give me the choice, I'll probably put her in C. I just don't like this though it's unique, I just don't like this like luck. Like I don't want to be lucky dealing damage. Like, come on. Yeah. Next up we have Sampo. Sampo. For now, I'm gonna put it above S. Above the top of C. I love his character. Like very goofy and all that. Very fancy speaking. Like very funny. But unfortunately, like I said previously, when I started talking about Clara, characters that deal AoE damage, or especially damage over time characters, aren't that, you know, good damage multiplier wise. And maybe in an upcoming patch with the release of characters that could buff damage over time, we might see Sampo shining. But for now, unfortunately, like he's a character that heavily depends on shearing to like deal his damage, and like maybe in content, oftentimes maybe enemies don't have a wind shear, and then you have to force to use him there. Like he might be useless, right? And yeah, which is why I'm putting him in C. Next up, we have Zile. Zile, in my opinion, the best character in the game. Now, for example, I can't really judge too much. How can I say that, for example, a DPS is better than a support? But that's the thing, right? That's why I call her the best character in the game. You might be asking why. Like, in my opinion, like she does her job the best, and I feel like her best is better than Bronya's best, which is very debatable. It's honestly like one or two, right? Bronya and Zile is like one or two in my opinion. But in my eyes, I feel like Zile is a better character. A character, again, something I value so much in this game is, since it's turn-based, a character that basically completely negates the concept of a turn-based game where you could, with the right combos, you could basically have her uh, take turns over and over and over again to the point where she could deal enough damage that the enemies won't deal you back, right? Having this mentality of like they won't kill me if I kill them first, right? If you build your sealer right with the right team around her, basically you'd never have to maybe build healers or shielders because of that, which could, like, again, we're just month in the game, we haven't really achieved something like this, so you'd always want to run a healer or a shielder with her. But regardless, a character that completely negates the concept of turn-based, it will always be held at the high regards. And it's not only that she only negates the turn-based, her damage multipliers are insane. Very good damage dealer. Like, what more can you ask for a DPS character? If you guys didn't get Zila, man, I'm sorry. Like, but when she comes back, I hope you guys pull her. Next up, we have Serval. Serval, man, I personally really like this character. You know what I mean? And putting bias aside, I feel like honestly, you could put her like behind March, in my opinion. Um, she's a very good like AoE damage dealer. And like I said previously, again for like the third time, AoE damage and damage over time are not that favored in this game. But a character like Serval, to an extent, can basically be an exception. Like to an extent, like Clara is the exception, and Jingy 1 to an extent, and Serval is like the third, to an extent, if you know what I mean. So Serval, like that's the thing, right? She's also lightning AoE DPS, lightning AoE damage dealer. So that means that, for example, if you have a Serval with a couple of Eidolons, you might not have to worry about bullying a character like Jingu 1, and that's kind of big, having a character that is comparable to a 5-star character, like damage multipliers wise, because that's true. So like I said, I don't like talking about potential. I didn't say I want to talk about potential, but I have to bring up this little point for anyone who is to consider pulling Jingy 1. Serval in E2 could be comparable to Jingy 1 in damage. And that's all I'm going to throw it out there. I'm just going to throw that information out there. A character like this, yeah, it is like I said, to an extent, is an exception. It has decent damage multipliers for an AoE DPS. We're always going to hold her to a bit higher regard, and I can't wait to see more potential otherwise. And I feel like because of that, she's going to deal a lot of damage. Next up, we have Sushang. Sushang, let me put her in front of Serval. She's in my opinion, the best 4-star like DPS character. Again, like I said, I hold characters who negate the concept of turn-based to a high regard, where basically she has the ability where if you use her ultimate, she gets her turn immediately back again, so that could like lead to dangerous combos, and like she deals like increased damage to physical weakness enemies, which is good, because most of the time in the game you're not going to be using like wind on fire enemies. You're always going to have wind enemies on with wind like team. So yeah, someone like Sushang, decent damage multipliers, the best 4-star DPS in the game in my opinion. I'm a holder here. Next up we have Tingyun, easily, and I mean extremely easily, at double S tier. I might even put her in front of Clara, right? Now, people might kill me now for that, but I'm gonna put her in front of Clara. Imagine Bronya, but a light version. And that's the thing, right? You think when I say a light version, that's like way worse, like made in China type of quality. But no, no, no. Like basically, Bronya, what she does is gives you like an extra turn and crit damage. Tingyun, like she doesn't give crit damage, but she gives you energy for your ultimate. And you pair that up with a character like Zile or Su Shang, it could basically give them extra turns and deal extra damage. And on top of that, her like buffs for benediction, her attack buffs, quite decent. Build it on attack, and you're gonna have your DPS hit like a truck. And yeah, awesome character in my opinion. Brawny light version, and she's like, in my opinion, like the best 4-star character in the game, and a must-have for every account. Because of course I might say Bronya and Zila is a must-have, but these girls are much more harder to get normally, right? But something like Tingyun, especially now she's in the Jingyi 1 banner, if you don't have a character if you don't have Tingyun and you have a couple of multis, I suggest you just like to throw like 2 or 3 multis just to get that Tingyun. Trust me, she gonna make your DPS very good. Next up, we're gonna have Destruction MC and Fire MC. I'm gonna consider the female character the destruction path. So, or the physical path, right? The physical damage dealer. In my opinion, physical MC is, honestly, top of C. And that's normal. Again, like I said, literally the first character you get in the game, it's not supposed to be last you to the end game. It's normal, especially with higher verse type of games. It's not gonna be special. In the beginning of the story, honestly, like he's only very viable till like the first boss fight that you have in the game, which is against the Doomsday Beast, I think. Or the guy in the space station, for people who don't know, like that big boss in the space station. He's only like useful there till that point of the story, and after that you kind of like just get your wishes and you start summoning, and then you completely forget about it. Man, that's normal. That's okay, especially in a Hoyoverse game. But next up we have Fire MC. Fire MC or Preservation MC is a, like I said, he's a preservation character, and honestly he's quite decent. Let me be honest about that. Honestly, I'll put him. You know what? I'm gonna put him here. Uh, in my opinion, better shield in March, like in terms of sustaining stuff. Surprisingly, like I said, in a Hoyoverse game, they don't like to make the starter characters or the free characters you can obtain by just completing the story very good. They kind of want to make them bad so they can push you to summon and stuff. But surprisingly, there are certain exceptions like Asta, Fire MC, Natasha, and March. Like for some reason, they kind of had a change of heart when it comes to designing these characters here. But there's still a fair share of like bad starter characters. Anyways, Fire MC is you know that's the thing, right? Like, that's why I mentioned up this disclaimer about that it's been more a month now and we can like completely like skip the honeymoon period and so that we don't have to bluff characters. Because of that, initially I feel like Fire MC was like way too overhyped, and once we kind of like understood him more and used him more, we kind of understood like he's not as good as advertised. A lot of people were like hyping up his shield, how good it is, that he can give a shield every time he attacks and whatever. It's not enough. Like that shield is basically paper thin, and I don't like characters that are like hybrid path in terms of damage and like I just don't like characters which are like hybrid paths. As in, for example, a character has his kit that relies on defense, and he has another kit that also relies on attack. So it'll be much harder to like know what is more important for you. So for example, you can either build like a full you know tanker defense MC, but let him and he hits like a like a air gun, and or you could build him on attack and make him like very like soft or vulnerable to high amounts of damage. But again, you know, luckily we've been past this honeymoon period, and I've used him for a quite decent time. I feel like honestly he's still a very good viable character. In my opinion, like he could be the second tank in the other team in the Memory of Chaos, and that's completely fine. Uh, and if it's a character like this, it's always going to be held to a high regard. Again, a character that's the Fire MC, and a character that you can easily obtain some Eidolons that can make him much quicker, and his Eidolons are quite decent. Uh, Easily A tier, and shout out to Hoyoverse for making the main character very viable, and hopefully they kind of follow the same path with the future, like let's just say elements being stronger than the fire MC, but I doubt they will do that. Next up we have Welt. Welt. Honestly, man, I'm gonna put him SS for now. Like, he is, in my opinion, the most character that is subject to change. Like, I feel like in maybe 1 or 2 versions later, I might put him in S. But for now, for what we have right now in the game, 1.0 version, SS. He is the only imaginary character in the game. That's already like more than enough to put a character like him in high tiers. And on top of that, he is an AoE slow like debuffer. So that means that again, another character, like I said, I value a lot, a character that completely negates the game mechanics, and a character like Welt, when he uses ultimate, when he uses skill, slows the opponents down from the form of imprisonment or just slowing them down on top of that, or both. And because of that, he basically gives your team and himself more chances to attack, and that makes a character like him extremely valuable. And like I said, on top of that, the only imaginary character in the game right now in the 1.0 version, what more can you ask for a character, right? In the Memory of Chaos or in general content, there might be opponents with a imaginary weakness, and when you have him, you're like, ah, oh, thank God. And he's also a very good weakness break character, like comparable to the level of Asta, especially like if it's like a single target, the skill can basically take away half of like a boss's shield, which is big. So yeah, a character that, long story short, is the only character in an element, a character that completely like jeopardizes the game mechanics by making characters like the opponent slow and imprisons them. What more can you have? But like I said, it's just his issue is that I personally have a Welt, and I'm really trying to build him quite decently. I kind of have like 2k attack on him, and I don't feel like he's dealing enough damage, personally. And that's the issue that I'm saying, that he's the most character subject to change. I feel like I said previously, if I put 1 or 2 versions later, he might like go down to S. But a great character nonetheless. I feel like he will be the best imaginary character for a while. And yeah, lastly, we have Yanqing. Yanqing, in my opinion, like, I'm gonna put it in the top of S. Like, I feel like, characters like Jeopard and Yanqing, initially when people started playing the game and pulled them from the, 50 wishes guaranteed 5-star, banner, got really mad. But but from what I'm seeing, like, I had friends who pulled these two, and especially Yanqing, they kind of like grew on my friends and people in general. And a character that's a single target DPS, so you compare it to Seal, and he's not as good as Seal in terms of damage dealing, but a character because of his skills can to an extent offer a lot of crit rate, so that means that you don't have to worry too much about crit rate, building crit rate in the character. So a character that basically helps to make your life artifact farming more simpler will always be very valuable and held to a high regard. So it was also quite Yanqing is also fast. Also deals a decent amount of single target DPS, which is the preferable way to deal damage in this game. Top of S, honestly. And yeah, this is my 1.0 tier list. If you guys have any like different opinions or different tier lists, I would love to see them, talk to you guys about it. And yeah, see you guys and have a good day.